Welcome to Discovery Watch with John Kaiser.
I'm Jim Goddard. Merry Christmas, John, for you and your family.
Merry Christmas to you, Jim, and our audiences.
Taking a look at what's happening in Australia, Nova Resources provided another update for its Pilbara play, and the market once again had a negative reaction. What was the bad news this time around?
Well, just to provide some background, the bad news in late November was that the large diameter drilling was not going to work, establishing the grade down dip where you end up getting Mount Roe basalt on top of it, and the other bad news back then was that the fine gold seemed to be limited to a small halo surrounding the nuggets themselves. And in yesterday's news release, the company has confirmed that yes, this seems to be the case. That there is no generally distributed fine gold. At the Scout core holes, they reported 3 of them. They had very low 0.01 to 0.04 gram per ton gold in them, which is not going to be the basis for doing any resource estimate, and probably isn't going to be useful for kind of establishing a base load grade for these beds, where you would then hope to get a higher bed grade when you can quantify the larger nuggets present. So the bad news today was that yesterday was that the Steinert facility at Nagram is not very efficient in processing these samples. They reported results for only 3 of the samples dug from pits taken from the trenched area where the conglomerate bed at Purdy's Reward daylights. 2 of them came back with about 15 and 17 gram per ton grades respectively, which is good as far as I'm concerned. Market was disappointed because the original sample came out with a 67 gram per ton, 2 ounce per ton from that one pit that they dug and released the results for in early August. Now, at the time we said, okay, this is a very unusually high number. We need to see a lot more data points to see how this behaves as you move along the strike of this daylighting bed. And 2 of them at 15 grams per ton. That's pretty good still. The third one was only 1.3 grams per ton. But when you start looking into the details of these samples, a suspicion starts to emerge that not only do they have a problem that possibly these sample sizes of 300 to 600 kilograms just aren't large enough to capture the nugget effect, but the gold nuggets may be confined to a fairly thin horizon within the conglomerate bed. For example, one of them that came in either 15 or 17 gram per ton, part of that sample consisted of basement rock. And one of the interesting parts of the Scout hole reporting, and these holes were drilled sort of in the vicinity where these samples were taken, is that as soon as they got into the basement rock, the gold grade turns to zilch. So there is something anomalous about the gold. And if they included part of the basement, gabbro, greenstone rock, with that sample, that would dilute the gold grade of that portion that was of the conglomerate bed nature. But dilution is another emerging problem, because if we're seeing the material sitting in a very narrow layer just above the basement within the conglomerate bed, say less than half a meter, that's not really a mining width. So you might have to double or possibly quadruple the amount of material that you grab with any sort of meaningful scale mining that goes beyond like a donkey and a pick. And all of a sudden, say 15 grams per ton drops down to 3 to 5 grams per ton as your mill feed. And that's where the economics start to become problematic. And then So there you need to be able to be really sure about measuring it properly. So Novo has said that we have taken a 3-ton sample, and we're doing a very careful analysis to figure out what sort of range of nugget sizes do we find within this material, and how does it tend to be distributed within the material. Because they have to figure out a way, what's the sort of minimum size they need to correctly measure the gold content of a chunk of the rock. But there's so many missing pieces from this news release that people are saying, we really don't know whether we even have something that's economic here. We had a few nice data points. You run around with your metal detector and you come up with fancy-looking large nuggets, and you can draw pink circles all over the place. But if the pink circles simply represent a very thin layer of the conglomerate bed, how are we ever going to figure out what exactly it is that we mine and shove into the mill? Now, one of the tidbits that was encouraging is that they have observed that the chlorite alteration surrounds many of the nuggets, and they've also identified chlorite-enriched shale fragments within the matrix. In other words, also classes of material that somehow ended up in that same area as the gold nuggets. And it has a distinct greenish, dark greenish color, and it could be, they don't have any explanation as to what exactly is going on, though this type of mineral is formed through metamorphism. But they seem to be hinting that they're starting to figure out a marker mineral that they could use to say, okay, where we find this, we're going to find the gold nuggets. They are doing multi-element analysis. They have not disclosed anything yet because they just received only 3 samples from the lab. So they really don't have a database yet to even start looking for correlations. And the market reacted negatively to the Novo news release because it realized it will probably be the second half of 2018 before we really start to get a sense of whether this thing is just a giant geochemical anomaly that's going to fascinate scientists and academics for decades, or whether we have an economic prize of a very large scale to be found here. And the other thing that that people have started to realize is it's kind of random where Novo has started working at Purdy's Reward. This just happens to be where the conglomerate bed under the Mount Roe basalt happens to daylight. And there's another 7 kilometers of this daylighting on the Comet Well project, for which Novo has now got the license granted. They've got the Narluma signed off on the heritage clearance, and they're now applying for work permits, which will probably take them till the end of February to do. But you go farther to the southwest, and you see the Elysian ground. You see a similar phenomenon of this daylighting conglomerate, and then you head all the way to the east over 100 kilometers, and you have a similar daylighting conglomerate. And nobody had ever really figured out where these nuggets that they were finding in the overburden through metal detecting came from, and it's just arbitrary that they started sampling right in this spot. And with this comes the realization, there's a huge discrepancy with the value the market has assigned to Novo Resources and that of all these other juniors who have realized they're sitting on something that's far more interesting than what they had been chasing, which was usually basement-hosted, structurally controlled gold systems or VMS systems. And so in the overnight trading in Australia, yes, the little juniors went down a bit, but they did not go down as much as Novo. And Novo, of course, owns 10,000 square kilometers because Quentin Henney's brilliance was to realize this could be huge scale, not just a local freak show derived from some river that dumped placer gold into the mouth of the river into the delta. All of that down to potential right now is effectively sterilized, because there's no way of cost effectively assessing it. In fact, they've had to retreat to trying to assess the part where you can move an excavator onto the material, scrape it up, and then they're still trying to figure out how to properly process this and say, okay, for this 2-ton piece of rock that we've taken from a 100-ton block of rock, we can now reliably say that this is the grade, and we can assign it to the rest of this material. And so therefore we're seeing a sell-off in Novo without that much collateral damage. And this is very healthy for the play, because in November, Novo had gotten kind of cranky, and Quentin Henney was quoting to the Australian media unhappiness about all these other little juniors coattailing, even though some of these juniors were fairly quickly adopted and bankrolled by Kirkland Lake and Eric Sprott themselves for their projects elsewhere. They all took the hit in November when the rug was sort of pulled out, and now Novo has kind of pulled the rug out from itself with its latest admission that we don't yet have a meaningful number of data points so that we can start talking about whether we're in the money in terms of grade, and we're still experimenting to see how to go about assessing these holdings that we have in the Pilbara region.
We'll have more Discovery Watch with John Kaiser right after the break.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Magnum Gold Corp. Inc., MGI on the TSX Venture Exchange. A 2015 drill program on the LH property intersected high-grade gold, including 16.9 meters of 13.58 grams and 11 meters of 20.66 grams per ton gold. A follow-up drill program is planned to further evaluate previously identified subsurface high-grade gold mineralization. Please visit our website at magnumgoldcorp.com.
I'm Greg Johnston, CEO of Carl Data Solutions, an industrial Internet of Things company that provides big data solutions for monitoring critical infrastructure. Carl Data offers machine learning and predictive analytics features through our cloud-based applications to deliver key asset-saving operational insights from massive amounts of data. Carl Data trades on the CSE, symbol CRL, and the pink symbol CDTAF. For more details on Carl Data, please visit carlsolutions.com.
Welcome back. We're chatting with John Kaiser. John, how does this sampling setback for Novo affect Artemis Resources, which is now a 50-50 partner with Novo at Purdy's Reward?
Well, it has had a negative effect on the valuation of Artemis, also because it was the second highest valued Pilbara Junior, mainly because it was 50-50 partners with Novo at Purdy's Reward. Novo has now submitted that it spent its $2 million and is vested as a 50-50 partner. Artemis is not disputing this. But with this latest setback, it means that ramping up the information about what Purdy's Reward is all about is going to take some time. And fortunately for Artemis, they did that deal in November for the Elysian grounds that give it 70% of the land to the southwest of the Comet Well project, and also a number of claims to the north where there are islands of Mount Roe basalt sitting on top of what appear to be conglomerate beds that have been spilling nuggets into the surrounding area that the fossicers have been digging up. So the danger for Artemis is that after Novo spends the next couple months, figuring out how it's going to proceed with Purdy's Reward, how to even explore this stuff, if it has its license, its permits for Comet Well, which it owns 80%, and where they got 7 kilometers of this stuff daylighting, whereas at Purdy's Reward, after about 1,200 meters or so, it disappears under overburden. On the Comet Well, you can just walk along. This is where Alan Ronk, with his airplane taking photographs has pretty much mapped the edge by simply isolating all the little pits that the fossickers have dug. And of course, they don't dig them any farther than their metal detectors beep. So they could shift their entire focus to that area and leave Purdy's reward to be sorted out somewhere down the road. Because the bigger problem is still, what do you do? How do you assess the down dip portion of these beds? So that means the news flow for Artemis could subside. Now, Artemis has one thing that's an important advantage. It has the Radio Hill plant, which it has now started refurbishing to get it back up and running. They plan to process some nickel, cobalt stockpiles that are there from some old mining operation, but they are also going to build a gold recovery circuit so that they can process larger bulk samples. So if it turns out that you're going to need to process 5-10 ton samples of material to get a sense for the what the grade is going to be, they're going to be in a position in the second half of next year. Now, this could be a facility that Novo might also want to use, but it's unlikely that Artemis is going to want to do that for anything except the 50-50 ground. So the onus is now on Artemis to start looking at its own ground, where it is the operator, and start doing the same work that Novo has been doing on Purdy's reward. And that's almost a catch-up type of thing, because by the time Novo has figured out how to step down dip and start assessing the deeper portions of the beds, everybody will, of course, know how to do that too, but they will have had to establish that the daylighting portion of their beds are also enriched in gold nuggets and with sufficient abundance to raise the probability that when you start spending money chasing this stuff down dip, you're going to deliver ore grades over mineable widths. So that's Artemis's situation right now, and they've been working with other groups like the CSIRO, which is this Australian R&D organization which supports scientific research for exploration in Australia. This is an interesting development because there was a lot of resentment a few months ago about these Canadians and Americans coming in here and grabbing all this land and telling the Australians that they overlooked something fantastic. But legends such as Mark Creasy, who was the source of the Beaton's Creek project for Novo, he's been interested in this region for a long time, since the 70s, and has never quite figured out where this gold that the fossickers have been finding for ages came from. And he kind of ended up sort of marginalized, but he seems to have developed a very intense interest. And of course, he works with groups like the CSIRO. They're out there now getting samples of material, doing their own studies. And it's a big mystery right now is, how did these nuggets form? They appear to have an internal crystalline structure, suggesting that they formed through some sort of precipitation. But that is, of course, how gold in fluids flowing through rock forms. It drops it out in all the cracks and fissures. So it's conceivable that this gold was eroded and transported into these basins. In fact, one of the sort of backpedaling things that Quentin Henney seems to have been doing is sort of suggesting that this is very similar to Nome, Alaska, where you have the Yukon River exiting in the ocean, and you're finding a nugget gold. You can sort of dredge it up from the sea bottom, and clearly this stuff has an upstream source. It's not formed in the mouth and in the delta of that river system. So that this whole idea of the precipitation theory and the large scale, it's like Quentin Henney has dialed back his enthusiasm for this idea as a mechanism. In fact, he even suggested that the gold that they're finding in the Purdy's Reward area is recycled sedimentary gold, in other words, the kind of WITS 1.0, very fine-grained stuff that may have formed in the deeper parts of the basin where these algae mats sat, but then this got digested and then reharvested by fluid flow to create this new type of nugget, which what still is a big puzzle is most of them have 96% or higher gold purity, whereas almost every nugget that has clearly derived from some sort of hydrothermally emplaced deposit has a greater impurity of copper and silver and so on. So the science behind all of this, although it seems to have been slapped back by the latest announcement, it's actually ratcheting up, and we're entering a period of intense curiosity about what is going on here. In fact, there was some article earlier this year in a science magazine stating that they've now proven that organic life existed 3.5 billion years ago in the Pilbara, and that some of it was photosynthesizing already back then. So we have this big gap of 500 million years, from 3.5 billion to about 3 billion years, where we don't know what was going on in whatever land masses existed back then. And now we have this period 3.0 to 2.7 billion, where WITS 1.1 formed, and where the horizons that host the nugget gold in the Pilbara contain very unusual nugget gold. So Artemis is starting to work with these other groups. It will develop its own internal databases and methods, and it needs to wean itself from its dependency on Novo's strategies for figuring out how to measure this stuff and also where to start measuring for gold content.
How does this affect the gray mining and its Loudon's Patch conglomerates over 100 Ks to the east?
The gray mining has a very large land package in an area that's mainly where it's basement rock, and they've been chasing the structurally controlled shear mineralization, and they actually have a resource there already and wanted to put this into production. But earlier this year, when the whole Novo story broke, they realized that at something called Loudon's Patch, these nuggets were being found, and the stuff that they had always ignored as simply covering the prospective greenstone basement where the gold deposits were supposed to be, this could actually be an interesting prize. And when we heard that similar watermelon seed shaped or cornflake shaped nuggets were being found in close association with a conglomerate bed underneath the Mount Roe basalt, 100 to 130 kilometers to the east of Purdy's Reward, that's what really gave this whole play a huge boost, because how could this similar stuff be stretched over such a vast region unless there was something very special going on that was different from some, veins up in the hills that managed to go up in some fault structure and then get eroded and transported down to the basin. So I think this area around that, there's other companies there. For example, there's Venturix Resources with its Wim Creek deposit, which has a piece of Loudon's Patch, and also has some Mount Roe basalt showing on its property. Now, it's after a basement-hosted VMS system there, which it's been working on forever. It has 3.6 billion shares fully diluted. But the biggest shareholders are Northern Star Resources, which is Australia's big domestic gold mining company, and Mark Creasy himself. and given Mark Creasy's interest in what is going on here, that's something he was always interested in and had given up on, some decade ago or so. All of a sudden, this is alive and well. So I think Novo basically putting a pause on everything gives the market a chance to look at everybody else who has exposure to this story, which could still be this, WITS 2.0 hypothesis that I talk about, that we have something similar in scale as in South Africa's Witwatersrand Basin, present here and overlooked because all the focus was always in the higher levels above the Mount Roe basalt, and nobody really looked at the conglomerates, which are a fairly thin horizon between the basement and the Mount Roe basalt. So yes, this area over there definitely now deserves to get a lot more attention because in effect, Novo's Purdy's Reward area is not that much more advanced than this area 100 kilometers to the east.
We'll have closing comments from John Kaiser when Discovery Watch returns.
I'm Bill McWilliam, president of Cascadero Copper, CCD on the TSX Venture Exchange. Cesium is one of the world's rarest metals with a growing industrial demand. Drilling is underway on our Tehran property in Argentina to prove up a cesium resource. Cascadero's patent-pending leach process has the potential to make Cascadero the lowest cost supplier of cesium in the world. Visit our website, cascadero.com, or phone us at 604-924-5504.
Cypress Development Corp's flagship lithium project is located just east of Albemarle's Silver Peak mine in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. A 12-hole exploration drill program for lithium-enriched claystone on Cypress's 100% controlled properties is now underway. Cypress Development Corp trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the Pink's CYDVF, and on Frankfurt's C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with John Kaiser. John, who else has strategic ground in the Loudon's Patch area?
Somewhat a bit south of where DeGray has its land position, there are three companies that I've got listed as Pilbara Wits 2.0 juniors. One is Kairos Minerals, which has been backed by Kirkland Lake and Eric Sprott. They were as high as 13 cents earlier this year, starting from a couple pennies, and they've dropped back to 4 cents. They have billion shares fully diluted, but they have very interesting ground, which Novo staked all around because Novo was clearly looking for areas where the either the conglomerate beds daylighted or where Mount Roe basalt was visible, meaning that the target horizon was not going to be too deep. When you get farther into the basin, you get hardy sandstone on top and then even younger formations on top. So, drilling 1,000, 2,000 meters deep to target the conglomerate beds farther in the basin, well, that's something for future decades for everybody to fix out. So Kairos Minerals, with its what they call the Croydon Project, that is something to pay close attention to. Then another junior, which is more like a Canadian junior in that it has less than 20 million shares fully diluted, is DGO Gold. And this is a group of, the management group is kind of technically oriented. They've been using all kinds of science-based stuff to chase gold all over Australia. And they've realized that in their Scotty's Well area, which is near the Croydon Project, that they've also got these Mount Roe covered conglomerates sitting there that they need to check out. And then there's another company which appears to have land in that area, which is Coase Iron Resources. And this thing again has a couple billion shares out, but Mark Creasy is the biggest shareholder of this, and they are focused on projects elsewhere in Australia, and they trade less than 2 cents. And the reason I bring up these companies, Novo is still valued at like 400 million to 500 million for its 100% owned projects. But these other companies, if you're trading at 2 cents and you have 2 billion shares out, and you have 100%, that's a $40 million valuation. So the kind of play that's emerging here is if the WITS 2.0 hypothesis is still alive, in other words, that this gold is abundant over a vast region, which many companies have a piece of, and a method can emerge to cost-effectively measure the grade. These other companies, which randomly happen to own pieces of this WITS 2.0, their valuation is still a tenth of that as Novo. And because it's all going to be about exploiting the near-surface daylighting portion of this pre-Mount Royal conglomerate unit, these are the ones that I think are going to get a lot of attention in the next 6 months while we wait for Novo, which has these $80 million treasury to, go in there and figure this stuff out with brute force. As Novo shows us how to go about measuring this stuff, the other juniors can go in there and start doing the scout drilling, doing the characterization of the beds, keeping a close eye on Novo, and also working with groups like CSIRO to get a better geochemical understanding of what is going on here, what makes these beds tick, what possibly makes the gold-bearing portions tick. So although it seems like the whole WITS 2.0 got another big kick in the head yesterday, in fact, it's given it breathing room. It's giving the other juniors a chance. It's giving the Australians a chance to take back ownership of this story, get hold of the science. And it reminds me a lot of 1992 when we had Diamet Minerals show up with the Caddy discovery. The stock ramped up. A bunch of juniors staked all this land, started going up. But then Diamet hit the wall in middle of 1992, and all of a sudden, everybody was skeptical that this was indeed going to be a meaningful diamond project. And in fact, 6 months later, the original Point Lake pipe turned out to be not worth pursuing, but Diamet had come up with other pipes like Panda and was off and running. And by then, the juniors, which took a hit in the second half of 1992, they started delivering their own diamond discoveries outside the We Got It All area claimed by Chuck Fipke, who expressed similar kind of unhappiness as Quentin Henney did about all these others poaching on his achievement. And ultimately, Diavik emerged, which arguably was a better diamond discovery than the Ekati cluster itself. So I think we're just in this pause as everybody retrenches and gets their bearings, and this play is still alive and well with all the potential huge, biggest gold rush outcome that I've been talking about since July.
John, have a great Christmas.
I will endeavor to do so, and you too, Jim.
We've been talking with John Kaiser, his website kaiserresearch.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Happy holidays.
Comments made on Discovery Watch are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at howstreet.com. Discovery Watch is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.